The war had ended, but Daniel was still alive. He was a human soldier left behind on a broken battlefield. The galaxy had already moved on. Ships had left, and armies had vanished into the stars. But Daniel remained on the burned planet, walking among ruins and ashes. Aliens believed humans were weak, fragile, and too emotional to survive in such places. Yet Daniel proved them wrong with every breath he took. Every night he searched for food, and every morning he hunted for water. His body was tired, but his spirit refused to break. One evening, as the blood-red sun set behind the broken mountains, Daniel saw something unusual. In the distance, beneath collapsed stone, there was a strange blue glow. He followed it, crawling through smoke and sharp metal until his hands bled. At last, he reached an entrance hidden under the ruins. The ground shook slightly as if the planet itself was guarding a secret. Daniel stepped inside and felt a cold wind whispering through the tunnels. Strange alien markings covered the walls, glowing faintly like living veins. The air smelled old, like dust mixed with power. He walked deeper and discovered a chamber filled with strange machines. In the center stood a massive pillar of crystal, humming with energy. Daniel placed his hand on it and felt a pulse, like a heartbeat answering his own. Suddenly, light wrapped around him, burning but not destroying. His bones vibrated, his muscles tightened, and his vision sharpened beyond human limits. It was as if the ancient technology had been waiting for someone like him. The chamber shook with thunder, as if history itself had awakened. Daniel fell to his knees, gasping, his body glowing faintly under his torn armor. Outside, in the far reaches of space, alien empires noticed the disturbance. Sensors screamed across fleets, warning that forbidden power had been touched. Commanders whispered in fear, remembering legends of weapons hidden long ago. When they learned it was a human, their fear doubled. Humans were never supposed to rise again after the wars. Yet here was one soldier who had triggered the impossible. Some wanted him killed immediately. Others argued he should be captured alive. But deep inside, they all knew something dangerous had begun. Back on the planet, Daniel tried to stand. He looked at his reflection in broken metal and saw glowing lines under his skin. His eyes no longer looked the same, sharp and bright, like a predator. When he touched the wall, stone cracked under his grip. When he jumped, his body moved faster and higher than ever before. He was not the same man anymore. The forgotten soldier had become something new, something the galaxy would learn to fear. That night, alien mercenaries landed to investigate. They carried plasma rifles and sneered at the idea of one human being a threat. Daniel watched them from the shadows, heart pounding but body steady. When they fired at him, he moved like lightning. Their blasts cut through stone but missed his body by inches. With one strike, Daniel broke a weapon in half. With one kick, he sent a soldier crashing through walls. The mercenaries screamed in fear as they realized this human could not be stopped. The survivors ran to their ships, shouting warnings into their comms. Not human, not normal, impossible strength, they cried. Daniel stood among the ruins, breathing heavily. He felt the energy inside him growing stronger every second, but he did not understand what it meant. He only knew one truth. He was no longer just Daniel, the forgotten soldier. He was something greater, something the stars had not seen in centuries. And out there in the galaxy, whispers began to spread of a human who could not be broken. The galaxy had many warriors, but only one would rise to become the strongest. And his journey had just begun. Daniel woke the next morning to silence. The planet was quiet, but inside him there was a storm. His body no longer felt heavy, no longer weak from hunger or thirst. He could hear the wind far away, the crack of stone as it shifted, and even the faint hum of energy beneath the ground. His senses had grown sharper, like a predator ready to strike. He clenched his fists and felt the air itself ripple. Something alive now burned inside him, and he could not ignore it. He walked across the battlefield ruins and tested his strength. Where once broken walls had stood tall against human soldiers, now Daniel pushed them aside like paper. When he jumped, he soared higher than any human should, landing without pain. His reflection in a pool of black water showed eyes glowing faint silver. The forgotten soldier was gone, replaced by something the galaxy had not seen before. Daniel was afraid, but also curious. What had the alien technology done to him, and why had it chosen him? He could not answer, but he knew his life would never be the same again. News of his survival spread like fire. The mercenaries who had escaped the night before carried stories to their alien masters. They spoke of a human who fought like 10 armies. They spoke of eyes that glowed and skin that shimmered with power. At first, leaders laughed, dismissing the tale as fear-born lies. But when fleets confirmed the energy pulse that had shaken half the sector, their laughter turned to dread. Councils of alien rulers gathered in secret. Their voices trembled as they whispered one word: human. Across the stars, humans were still seen as primitive. Most had been forced to live under alien law, treated as laborers, soldiers, or worse. But Daniel's name began to spread among them. They heard the whispers too, carried by smugglers and spies. A human warrior who had defeated mercenaries alone, a man stronger than machines. To the oppressed humans scattered across colonies, Daniel became a spark of hope. To the alien empires, he became a nightmare waiting to grow. Back on the ruined planet, Daniel trained himself. He learned how to control the strange energy in his body. When he struck the ground, cracks spread like rivers. When he shouted, the air trembled with his voice. Yet the power was not only in his body, it lived in his mind as well. He began to understand alien markings in the ruins without learning their language. He saw flashes of ancient battles, visions of weapons that once ended civilizations. He realized that the crystal he touched was not only a machine, but a memory. It had poured knowledge into him, waiting for a warrior strong enough to carry it. Still, Daniel struggled with fear. Every night, he wondered if he was becoming less human. His heart still beat, his mind still remembered his family, his fallen friends. But his body was no longer bound by the same limits. Would the galaxy see him as a savior or as a monster? He did not know, and that thought kept him awake under the broken sky. Then came the test. One evening, a new group of alien hunters landed, stronger than mercenaries, faster, and armed with weapons from across the Empire. They surrounded the ruins, mocking the idea that a single human could resist them. Daniel stepped forward, his body calm, but his spirit blazing. The first attack came fast, a beam of plasma bright enough to melt steel. Daniel raised his hand, and the blast split apart like water against stone. The hunters froze, their confidence draining into terror. Daniel moved faster than their eyes could follow, striking, dodging, crushing weapons with his bare hands. Within minutes, the battlefield was silent again. Only Daniel stood, breathing slowly, his body glowing brighter than before. Those who survived crawled back to their ships. This time they did not only whisper, they broadcast across channels. They screamed warnings into the stars. The human cannot be stopped. The human is awakening. And across the galaxy, those words spread further than fear itself. Daniel stood alone in the ruins, the wind carrying the scent of smoke and dust. He looked at his hands, trembling not from weakness, but from the weight of power. He was no longer forgotten, no longer just a soldier abandoned after war. He was something more, something that frightened the strongest empires. The awakening had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy had begun to whisper Daniel's name. Some said he was a myth, others said he was a weapon. But to the alien warlords, he was a threat that had to be removed. Among them was General Kravos, a giant reptilian commander known for crushing rebellions without mercy. Kravos laughed when he heard about the human warrior, but deep inside, his pride demanded proof. So he took his fleet and set course for the ruined planet where Daniel still lived. Daniel felt the coming danger before the ships even arrived. The ground hummed. The sky grew darker as shadows of war cruisers covered the sun. He stood on the ruins, watching the fleet descend, his body calm, though his heart pounded. This was not mercenaries anymore. This was war itself landing at his doorstep. He could run, but something inside refused. If he fled, the galaxy would never believe humans could stand strong. So Daniel clenched his fists and waited. The alien soldiers poured out first, their armor heavy, their weapons glowing. They formed ranks, surrounding the ruins with precision. Daniel counted dozens, then hundreds, his body tensing for the storm. Then the ground shook as Kravos himself stepped forward. He towered above his soldiers, claws sharp, scales glistening, his voice like thunder. "Human," he growled, "you dare disturb power that was never yours." Daniel said nothing, his silence louder than any words. The alien commander raised his blade and pointed at him. "Today your legend ends," Kravos declared. The first wave of soldiers attacked. Blades and plasma bolts cut through the air, but Daniel moved like lightning. He weaved between their strikes, his fists shattering armor, his kicks breaking bones. Explosions shook the ruins. Smoke filled the battlefield. Yet Daniel never fell. With every move, his power grew, glowing lines of energy wrapping around him like armor. The soldiers who had once laughed now screamed in terror as they were thrown aside. But then Kravos charged. His steps cracked the ground, his blade gleaming with alien energy. He swung with the force of a collapsing star. Daniel caught the strike with both hands, his arms trembling as sparks lit the sky. The ground split beneath them, stone breaking like glass under their power. Kravos roared, pushing harder, yet Daniel's eyes burned with defiance. With a sudden surge, Daniel shoved the blade aside and struck the warlord across the chest. The giant staggered back, shock flashing across his reptilian eyes. The battle became a storm. Kravos unleashed fury, his strikes faster and heavier, but Daniel answered each one. They clashed again and again, steel against flesh, fire against will. Alien soldiers watched in awe, unsure who to fear more, their commander or the human who stood unbroken. At last, Daniel leaped high, higher than any human should. He came down with a strike that sent Kravos crashing into the ruins. The ground shook like an earthquake, dust rising in waves. When it cleared, the alien warlord crawled to his knees, blood dripping from his mouth. For the first time in his life, Kravos felt fear. He stared at Daniel, this lone human whose strength defied the laws of nature. He could have fought longer, but something inside him whispered defeat. Rage burned in his chest, but survival screamed louder. So the mighty warlord retreated, his fleet pulling him away from the broken battlefield. His soldiers followed, dragging their wounded, leaving the ruins in silence once more. Daniel stood among the rubble, breathing hard, his body glowing faintly. He was scarred, his armor torn, but his spirit unbroken. He had faced a warlord, one feared across the galaxy, and he had survived. No, not only survived, he had forced the monster to retreat. The story of that battle would travel faster than any fleet. Across colonies, humans whispered his name with hope. Across empires, rulers whispered it with dread. The first true encounter was over. But Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had tested him, and he had answered with power. More enemies would come, stronger than Kravos, fiercer than mercenaries. Yet deep inside, Daniel felt something dangerous. A hunger to push further, to see how far his power could grow. And as the stars watched, the legend of the human warrior began to spread like wildfire. The galaxy was restless after the battle with General Kravos. News of the warlord's defeat spread faster than light, carried by frightened soldiers and trembling witnesses. They spoke of a human who had fought alone and forced a legendary commander to retreat. To common people across the stars, it was a story of hope. But to the rulers of alien empires, it was the beginning of a nightmare. In grand halls filled with starlight and shadows, alien leaders gathered. Some were scaled and cold-blooded. Others were tall with metallic skin. Others floated with glowing eyes. They argued in harsh voices, their fear hidden behind arrogance. "How can a single human defeat Kravos?" one demanded. "If one rises, then more will follow," another hissed. "The humans must be controlled before this becomes rebellion," whispered a third. For the first time in centuries, powerful empires agreed on one thing. Humans were dangerous. They looked back into history. Humans had once been warriors during the first expansion wars, fierce and stubborn. Even when outnumbered, they had never surrendered easily. Aliens had broken Earth, crushed its fleets, and scattered its people across colonies. Humans were useful as workers, miners, or soldiers for hire, but never equals. Now Daniel's rise threatened to undo centuries of control. One soldier had done what entire armies could not, and that made every ruler tremble. In secret meetings, plans were made. Some wanted to destroy Earth completely, burning it so no more Daniels would rise. Others wanted to capture him, to study him, to twist his power into a weapon for themselves. A few even suggested turning human populations into slaves once and for all. But none could deny the truth. Daniel had become the most feared name in the galaxy. Back on the ruined planet, Daniel felt the weight of that fear. He trained every day, testing the strange energy that lived inside him. When he punched stone, mountains cracked. When he ran, the ground blurred beneath his feet. When he closed his eyes, he saw visions of battles long past, left in his mind by the alien crystal. Knowledge of ancient wars filled him, strategies, weapons, powers beyond imagination. He understood what the empires feared, because even he was afraid of what he might become. But humans scattered across colonies began to dream again. For years, they had lived under alien boots, working in mines, starving in camps, serving as cheap soldiers. Now whispers reached them about a human warrior, a man stronger than warlords. Some laughed, some doubted, but many believed. In their hearts, Daniel's legend became a spark of rebellion. And sparks, when fed by hope, could turn into flames. The empires watched this with terror. Reports came daily. Human workers refusing orders, human soldiers disobeying alien generals. The name Daniel spread like fire across their lips. He was not only a man anymore, he was a symbol that humans could rise, that humans could fight, that humans could win, and symbols were far more dangerous than weapons. Daniel himself did not seek to lead. He still wandered the ruins, still questioned what he had become. Yet he felt the pull of destiny. Every attack against him, every alien force sent to silence him, only made him stronger. Every victory only spread his legend further. And the galaxy began to divide between those who feared him and those who prayed for him. Alien spies reported that some enslaved worlds had begun to chant his name in secret. Others carved his likeness into walls, a glowing figure with burning eyes. To rulers, this was a warning that control was slipping. To the people, it was proof that a savior had arrived. The balance of power that had lasted for centuries was breaking. And at the center of it all stood one forgotten soldier who had refused to die. The galaxy had many threats, fleets, weapons, empires, but now it faced something far more dangerous. It faced a human who had risen beyond fear. It faced a warrior who carried the power of ancient technology and the will of an unbroken spirit. It faced Daniel, the human who had become the galaxy's strongest. And no council, no empire, no warlord could agree on how to stop him. They only knew one thing. If they did nothing, the human threat would soon become the human revolution. Daniel was no longer alone. His battle against Kravos and the whispers of his victories had reached human ears across the galaxy. From mining colonies to forgotten space stations, from prison camps to abandoned worlds, humans began to rise. They had lived for generations as slaves, laborers, and cannon fodder for alien wars. But now they carried one name in their hearts: Daniel. At first, they came in small numbers. A handful of escaped miners arrived at the ruined planet, starving but burning with hope. They had heard that a human warrior lived here, one who had stood against warlords. Daniel looked at them with doubt, wondering if he could lead, but their eyes told him everything. They did not want a god, they wanted a teacher. Daniel began to train them. He showed them how to fight with strength and courage. He taught them to use their bodies, to endure pain, to never break. But more than that, he taught them discipline. He had seen alien armies crumble when they underestimated humans. Now he would forge humans into something the galaxy could not ignore. The ruins became a camp. Every day, new groups arrived, smuggling themselves across space. Farmers, workers, children of soldiers, all ready to fight for freedom. Daniel watched them grow, their weak bodies turning strong, their broken spirits becoming fierce. It reminded him of Earth's old history, when small bands of humans had stood against impossible odds. And just like then, the fire of rebellion began to burn brighter. Aliens soon discovered what was happening. Scouts reported human gatherings, weapons stolen, ships captured. The empires panicked, sending fleets to crush these camps. But this time Daniel was not alone. When the fleets arrived, they faced not one warrior, but hundreds of trained fighters. And at the front stood Daniel, glowing with power, leading his people. The battles were brutal. Plasma rained from the skies. Alien machines tore across the ground. Yet the humans fought with desperation, every loss fueling their rage. Daniel moved through the battlefield like a storm, tearing apart tanks, breaking enemy lines. His soldiers followed, their courage multiplied by his presence. For the first time in centuries, humans won. Not just survived, but won. That victory spread like a spark across the galaxy. Every enslaved human colony now believed in the legend. More camps rose, more soldiers trained, more ships stolen. The empires tried to silence it, but the harder they struck, the stronger the humans became. Each defeat only added to Daniel's legend. And every alien commander who faced him returned with the same words: the human cannot be stopped. But Daniel felt a weight on his shoulders. He had not asked to lead an army. He had not wanted to be a symbol. Yet now thousands looked to him. Children saw him as hope. Warriors saw him as a commander. And enemies saw him as death. The galaxy had forced him into this role, and he could not turn away. For if he did, his people would be crushed once more. And this time, there would be no second chance. As the human army grew, alien leaders gathered again in fear. They had never believed humans could unite. They had seen them as scattered, broken, too weak to fight back. Now they watched entire fleets fall to a race they thought finished. And the question rose in every council: if one human could destroy warlords, and if one human could build an army, what would happen if all humans rose together? Daniel stood at the edge of the ruined planet one night, watching stars glitter across the sky. Behind him, his soldiers trained, their voices echoing with strength. He knew the galaxy was preparing to strike harder. Bigger fleets, stronger enemies, greater challenges. But he also knew something else. The age of human weakness was over. The age of the rising army had begun. The galaxy could no longer ignore the rise of humans. Daniel's victories had shaken empires. His army had grown from whispers to thunder. Worlds that had once mocked humans now feared their shadow. And the rulers of alien civilizations made their decision. They would end the human threat with one final strike. Fleets gathered from every corner of the stars. Massive warships armed with cannons that could destroy moons. Legions of alien soldiers bred only for war. Colossal mechs, drones, and weapons older than history itself. No empire trusted another. Yet for this one cause they stood united. The human warrior must be destroyed, or the galaxy would fall. Daniel knew they were coming. The sky was restless, the stars too quiet. Every instinct told him the storm was near. He stood before his army, thousands of humans who had once been slaves. Now they wore stolen armor, carried captured rifles, and burned with new courage. They were not ready to fight a galaxy, not yet, but Daniel was, and he could not allow fear to touch their hearts. When the alien fleets arrived, the sky turned into fire. Dozens of worlds shook as armadas filled the void. From orbit, alien commanders watched Daniel's camp below. A small planet, a small army, yet one that had defied them all. Destroy them. The orders came, and the greatest war the galaxy had ever seen began. The first wave of fire tore through the ground. Explosions lit the night, mountains shattered, and rivers boiled. Yet Daniel stood tall, his body glowing like a star. He leapt into the sky, his fists cutting through the air. With one strike, he broke a battleship in half, sending flames across the void. The alien soldiers screamed as their strongest weapons could not pierce his skin. Every blast he turned aside. Every strike he answered with fury. His army fought below. Humans who had once been weak now stood shoulder to shoulder. They held the line against endless waves, refusing to fall. Every loss made them fight harder. Every wound became a badge of defiance. Daniel's presence gave them strength. He moved like a storm across the battlefield, breaking machines, shattering mechs, crushing legions. His power had grown beyond imagination. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a force of nature. The alien rulers watched in horror. They had sent fleets meant to erase stars, but one human stood against them. And worse, he was winning. Every warlord, every general, every commander realized the truth they had denied. Humans were not weak, they were not fragile. They were the most dangerous race alive. Because when pushed to the edge, they did not surrender, they transformed. But Daniel faced a choice. As his power grew, so did the hunger inside. He could crush the galaxy, rule it with fire, bend every empire to his will. The crystal's whispers tempted him, showing visions of thrones and endless armies. Yet his heart remembered Earth, remembered the friends he lost, remembered why he fought. Not for power, not for conquest, but for freedom. He would not become another tyrant. He would become a protector. With a roar that shook the stars, Daniel unleashed his full strength. Energy poured from him like a sun tearing open the void. Ships crumbled, fleets broke apart, weapons turned to dust in his hands. But he did not kill without reason. He struck only to break chains. When the smoke cleared, the alien armadas were shattered. Not destroyed completely, but broken enough to flee. The galaxy had thrown everything at him, and it had failed. Silence fell over the battlefield. Daniel stood in the ruins, his army cheering behind him. The humans had faced the united strength of alien empires and survived. No, more than survived, they had won. The galaxy would never forget this day, because it was the day one human stood against all, and the galaxy realized it could not stop him. The galaxy had changed forever after the Great Battle. Fleets once thought unstoppable had been shattered. Warlords once feared had fled, and empires once united now trembled in silence. And at the center of this storm stood one man, Daniel, the human warrior who had risen from the ashes of war. The forgotten soldier had become the strongest being in the galaxy. Aliens feared him, humans worshipped him, and his name traveled faster than light itself. On every colony where humans were enslaved, whispers turned into songs. Children repeated his name in secret. Workers carved his likeness into walls. Soldiers painted his symbol on stolen weapons. Daniel had become more than a man. He had become a legend of strength, defiance, and survival against impossible odds. But Daniel himself did not seek glory. He walked among his people, training them, guiding them, reminding them that their strength came not from him alone, but from their own spirit. He warned them that one man could not win freedom for all. It would take unity, courage, and sacrifice. Still, His presence inspired them to believe in what once seemed impossible. Alien rulers gathered once more in their shadowy councils. They could no longer deny the truth. Humans could not be broken. Some argued that peace must be offered, that treaties must be made. Others demanded vengeance, calling for new weapons, darker strategies, forbidden powers. But behind every plan was the same fear. If one human could rise this far, what would happen if more followed? Daniel himself wondered the same. He stood at night beneath the stars, his glowing eyes watching constellations that once belonged only to alien empires. He knew his power was still growing, the energy within him burning brighter each day. It scared him, not for himself, but for what it meant. If he lost control, he could become the very monster he swore to fight. And so he chose a path. He would not rule as conqueror. He would stand as protector. His army grew into more than soldiers. They became guardians of enslaved worlds, liberators of colonies long forgotten, defenders of those too weak to fight. Where once aliens saw humans as tools, now they saw them as warriors who could topple empires. Daniel led them not with fear, but with hope. And hope was something no empire could kill. Soon, entire civilizations began to shift. Some aliens, once enemies, now looked at humans with respect. They saw Daniel's mercy in battle, his refusal to slaughter without cause. They saw that he was different from the tyrants they had always known. And slowly, very slowly, the galaxy began to change. Yet Daniel's story was far from over. He knew more battles would come, stronger enemies, darker powers waiting beyond the stars. The ancient crystal had shown him glimpses of threats not yet awakened. Forces older than empires, shadows waiting for their time. And Daniel understood that his fight was not only for humans. It was for all who lived under fear. The legend of the strongest warrior spread like fire. But in Daniel's heart, he still remembered the beginning. A forgotten soldier left on a ruined planet, starving, broken, and alone. If he could rise from that, then anyone could. That was the lesson he carried, the lesson he gave to his people. Strength was not only in power, but in the will to never surrender. And so the galaxy watched, some in fear, some in hope, some in silence. The name Daniel echoed in every corner of space. The human who could not be stopped, the warrior who chose protection over tyranny. The galaxy's strongest and yet still human. And as whispers spread, one question grew louder with every passing day. If one human could rise to such power, what would happen when more followed his path?